Hi, welcome to today's episode of The Munello Show, where we compare mobile apps versus web apps.
Ooh, that sounds cool.
Yeah.
My name's Jason.
My name's Matt.
Yeah, and we're going to be talking about mobile apps, web apps versus mobile apps on your phone.
Yep.
So that sounds like a pretty interesting thing to talk about. There's a lot of ramifications you can think of, like when you're thinking about what software, where you want to go with your product or that sort of thing. Should we go web app? Should we go mobile? Should we do both? What's the play there? So before we get into that, though, we should probably talk a little bit about a history lesson. So we'll talk about kind of the early days of the internet and how it's come through into the modern age with smartphones and that sort of thing. So when everything first started out, we're talking, when the internet as a big thing that consumers could go to and access information, when that all was like really becoming popular, it was like the early 90s and whatnot. Little Jason was still in high school, or no, not high school. Less than high school, like grade school. But back when it first kind of became popular, like the only thing you could really do on there is access like HTML and styling through CSS for things. So you could go to a website and it would throw you back information, and what you saw on the screen was pretty much what you got. No interactivity for the most part. No like extra bells or whistles or anything like that.
Yeah. You'd load up Netscape Navigator after listening to that thing in the corner of the room, kind of boot up, right?
It's exactly how it sounded like. Thanks, AOL.
Yep, that's Netscape Navigator would pop in and just like you said, would literally just load the HTML and CSS of the page that you're requesting from the server.
Yeah, and it didn't even get like real complicated. Like JavaScript wasn't even a thing until 1995 or something like that, and that's when you could really start doing some things on the front end. But when things started getting pretty cool is when it started getting dynamic. So again, we said HTML and CSS is all that you got. So you could see the things, but you couldn't do anything with the things. So circa like 1996 through the 2000 time, you started to get server-side scripts being able to run. So now you could have an interface with HTML that you would be able to click buttons and click different things, type in messages and whatnot. Read from a server somewhere, and you would be able to have a server give you information and update that HTML that you were seeing.
Yeah, so get information from a database. Yeah.
Exactly. So it wasn't just like, here's the HTML, but it was, here's HTML, and we're going to update it in a moment or two, depending what's going on. So that was cool, and that's when like the .com bubble kind of started, where you started to get like websites where you could buy things from and like advertise your services and that sort of thing. But things really started to get bigger when the whole Web 2.0 thing started, and this is when there was a shift towards user-generated content instead of just content that the owner of the website would put through. So you think of things like Facebook. Yeah, that's when that was, like when it was starting, it was a big thing. So users could use all the concepts we talked about before and type in their name and their information and other things and connect with friends who also had profiles. And they were determining the content. They were putting their statuses up and their little pictures and whatnot, and everybody could go through and see it.
Yeah, think of your MySpace profile. Think of your WordPress blog or your Blogger blog in the very beginning.
Anybody do LiveJournal?
LiveJournal.
Remember LiveJournal?
Think of comments on blog posts that used to be a thing, right? Yep, that's where users were providing the content. Yep.
Yeah. So that's like the early days, like the start, the first half of this whole web app discussion that we're having.
And mobile wasn't even a thing.
Yeah. Like everyone's if you remember that time,
sending text messages on their phones, looking at their screens. Like some, physicists started to have Blackberries, right?
You could have internet on your phone, but you were limited to like up, down, left, right, and then the normal phone keyboard that might have the text on it, so you could press 5 3 times and it would go to K or something like that, right? So it was like really basic hard to do for most people way of typing things out. Certainly not something that you could write an entire blog post on reliably within a reasonable period of time.
Yeah. Get your 800 to 925 words in a blog post from an old school.
What's the
flip
SEO
phone?
value on this flip phone article that I'm running? There's people who write their books on typewriters as like part of the old school process. Like George R.R. Martin does that with his books. I wonder if there's people who like old-timey get out their little bricks and write their stories in their blog posts.
It would probably need to be plugged into the wall the whole time while they're sitting there hitting all the keys. I would think so.
Right. Man, that's kind of crazy.
Man.
But as Matt alluded to, there came a time when devices started getting more powerful. You had things like the BlackBerry come out, other little devices that had keyboards on it, and suddenly you could interact. Palm Pilots, and T-Mobile had their specific one. I forget what it was called, but it like shifted and then it opened up. I forget what it was called, but it was one of the early like keyboard phones. That was their whole big gag. But you had that going on, and when things really started to get kicking is with the invention and the coming out of the smartphone.
Yep.
Suddenly it wasn't just like small screens that were meant for, viewing contacts and stuff and really weren't all that great for web experiences. Now you have this bigger screen that was more like an actual computer screen. No more keyboards or anything like that because it was all on the phone. Like all of that was actually there.
Right. Thanks to the launch of the iPhone.
Right.
Basically killing the physical keyboard and only bringing in the digital keyboard when it was needed while you were, browsing the internet or watching videos or whatever. Right.
Exactly. And as those started to get more powerful, you had, you started getting more onboard memory. You started getting more processing power, more like graphical capability and storage. Yeah. So you could start doing things on phones that were usually only reserved to being applications on computers.
Yep.
Right? So that's when things really, really started to like ramp up and kick their things, kick the wheels on the proverbial like race car tires. So you were able to get those cell phones, and of course when they became more popular, you could start putting actual applications on them. And suddenly like you were torn. Would you create your web app experience, or would you create something very specific to this device that could handle a more kind of like a bigger workload, as it were? So
and thanks to infrastructure companies like over the whole telecom industry over the first decade of the 2000s into after 2010, like they really put in infrastructure for people to be able to for these devices to actually to use the power on these devices, right? And the infrastructure is what was needed, and it's where cloud computing really became huge, scalability really became huge.
Yeah, that's the next thing is you've got this application, can it handle hundreds of thousands of users? Can it handle like all of the data passing that through? And everybody and their mother started getting these phones and started being able to use this, where before like you needed at the time like a $1,000, $2,000 laptop or computer to access web applications or actual applications on the device. And now you have this $500 thing that was way more accessible to more people, where you could do the same. More users came about from that. So cloud computing obviously helped kind of produce that. And that kind of leads us to where we are now, right? In our discussion. So let's define and characterize a mobile app versus a web app. So mobile apps in general are platform specific. So they're typically made to work with one operating system. Either you've got your Android iOS or your Android iOS. Wow, I just angered.
That's a new platform.
Two giant.
What app store do I go for
sites.
those?
Jason is dumb.
JasonPlaystore.com.
Yeah. So you'd either have your Apple iOS or your Android operating systems. Those are the two big ones. Windows tried to make their whole
the
thing.
Windows one, yeah.
That was a thing.
The tiles.
The tiles, yeah. I did that for a while. BlackBerry still tried for a little bit of time to have their own thing, and then I'm sure every company probably thought about doing a proprietary one at some point,
right?
Or not. I'm sure Samsung was right up there thinking about it.
Yeah, I think Samsung does. I think they have some proprietary apps for their...
Oh, they definitely have their own Play Store.
Yeah.
But not like their own operating system for a smartphone device.
Yeah.
But I'm sure that was a thought when it was coming out. Like, can we do this? But
yeah.
So anyway, typically those mobile apps are obviously they're installed on the physical memory from a Play Store, like Matt had mentioned, either the Google Play Store, the Apple App Store, or whatever,
or JasonPlayStore,
or JasonPlayStore.com. I gotta go get that now because thousands of users are gonna go to JasonPlayStore.com.
Yeah.
And they introduce or they have a lot of features that you probably won't find all that much on web apps. So we're talking like push notifications to make your phone buzz when you get a Facebook message or when a new email comes in, or when your order is ready at the restaurant or something like that.
Or a flash sale. Here's a coupon code.
Yeah. You can notify your users of some new update or data without them having to go retrieve it. It's sent on their phone as a notification, just like a text would come in or something like that. But you also have, and this is probably one of the bigger ones, offline access. So, of course, with web apps, you could probably figure a way to do offline access, but it's not really as reliable as you would get with a native solution. So a lot of apps are able to function without that internet connection. Games can function without that internet connection. So if you're, up north with no connection or something like that, in Michigan, we say up north to refer to anywhere that's north of where we currently are. But typically no service in those kind of wilderness type areas. You could still access things like books and movies and music files and stuff like that with those apps. And then obviously there's hardware access. Every phone has like a GPS unit, a gyroscope,
accelerometer, camera,
all this other like these little tools that can be used to get your heart rate or figure out how far you've ran or something like that.
You know what these devices also have on them?
What do they also
have?
A
phone app.
What's that?
Yeah.
Is that what that weird icon is?
Yeah.
That little green thing with the weird like two big parts to it?
Yeah. You can call and send, receive phone calls.
Who does that? My boss called me yesterday. It was really weird. Or today, not yesterday. So in general, they are faster because you can, those devices are optimized for specifically what they're running. You don't have to have a browser that is meant to be able to reliably work on almost every device you could think of. You've got one code or one code base or one kind of platform that's specific to what that platform knows is going to run their software. And then the user experience, of course, is a little more tailored to the device that you're working on. It's smoother, more intuitive. And then updates, just as in general, they need to be updated when there's an update. So it's not like you go to a web browser and you get the newest and latest. You actually have to, in most cases, to get a new piece of the software, go to them and update them, or have them auto-update in the background. Yeah, so that is mobile apps. When we talk about web apps, we're thinking that they're platform neutral, like I kind of alluded to. Every device everywhere should be able to access a browser and be able to use those web apps. And they are browser-based, so there's no need to install anything other than the browser that you've already got for the most part.
Which is Google Chrome, Safari, Firefox, Opera, and there's Microsoft Edge, of course, and then there's
the plethora of
17
based off of
17 other trying to think of a few right at the top of my head.
Tor, is that one?
Tor, maybe. Brave. There's just so many, different browsers.
We should get our friend Jeff in here. He'd be able to tell us each and every one.
Oh, yeah.
In general, features-wise, they focus on an adaptive design. So they're meant to be adapted to the screen and a changing screen, right? So like browsers, you can obviously make smaller and bigger on your physical screen, and see them in different aspect ratios, and it's not always going to be the same. Even between computers that have the same aspect ratio, you might have a user that puts the browser on half their screen or 25% of their screen or something. So it's bigger and smaller and different.
Yeah, and all those people working from home, that have a computer, that have a laptop given to them by the company, or maybe they went out and bought one, and then they got an external monitor, another monitor they use, or even some people broadcast up onto a TV. But you pull up the web app on your computer screen, and then you drag it over to the other monitor. The other monitor is not going to be the same size as this.
Right.
So the web app needs to be able to respond accordingly to the viewport.
Exactly. Another feature of that is centralized updates. So unlike mobile apps, web apps can be kind of updated centrally without user intervention. So someone goes and runs code for their server or their host, and there's no interaction from the user. No update needs to happen. It's just next time they go to that web page, likely they're going to get served with a new page or the new content on the front page. And then traditionally, there's limited hardware access, though this is changing slightly as time goes on. But because there are so many different platforms that browser-based software could go onto, there's really no telling whether the device that's being used for that software will have that specific piece of hardware to enable the feature. Right. So not every laptop is going to have Bluetooth access.
Sure.
For example, right? That's a pretty common thing that might be up or down. So.
Right. Or the location, the network card or whatever.
Right. They might just have a plug-in instead of Wi-Fi if you've got an old enough laptop. Or the reverse is true. Right. You might just have the Wi-Fi and not an actual plug-in.
Right.
So in general, browsers or browser-based software is kind of easily accessible from any device with an internet connection on a browser. So it's very easy to go to different devices, like we mentioned. Performance can be slower for those same exact reasons. And with a reliance on the internet, of course, that makes it a little bit slower as well, especially depending on how big a payloads things are getting.
Right, and how many extensions you have running. Right.
Yeah.
And how many third-party scripts that website is running on them. For tracking.
Yeah, how many tabs you have.
Analytics, how many tabs you have open. What else is running on your computer? Yeah. Are you processing a 180 meg JPEG?
For your front home screen.
For your home screen.
Inside joke. Yeah. But many of you probably understand that.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the user experience is more uniform. It probably doesn't have that deep integration that we were kind of talking about, because you have to assume that there are lots of different interfaces that you might be using to access that web address. So
they can't be tailored towards how iOS users use their mobile apps. Because there's going to be, Windows and Android users that are hitting the web app in the browser. And if it kind of matches the way iOS is done, it's going to kind of throw off the user experience. Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah. I mean, just think of, there's been times over the past 10 years or so where Apple would do things one way, which was counter to how everybody else was doing things.
Yeah.
So, iPhone users would get one general culture experience, and non-iPhone users would get a different one. And it's kind of weird when those things start to butt heads. When you have a browser-based experience, you don't really get those types of experiences. Think of chat bubbles in your texting app.
Yeah.
Right. Apple obviously has I forget the colors, but I'm going to get ripped on if I say this wrong, but they have one color for people who have iPhones and one color for people who don't have iPhones in your conversation. And that's like a whole thing. Yeah. Right? So if you think of a more generalized experience, you probably wouldn't get much of that. It would just be, are you using MMS? Are you using SMS? Are you using this platform, that platform, whatever the case may be?
Yep.
So that's a history and then an overview of the characteristics of mobile apps versus web apps. Let's start talking more in depth about them. Advantages, disadvantages. You probably kind of already gleaned some from what we talked about, but I think we can go a little more in depth. So I'm going to stop talking now.
Oh, you don't have to stop talking.
No, I'm gonna. I can just shut up. It's all right. You can tell me when you don't want me to talk anymore.
You're good. This is all great info. So A few of these advantages and disadvantages we've kind of already covered because they're just flat out a characteristic of the two different technologies, really. But one of the main advantages of a mobile app is its performance. Of course, built right, done right, connected to the backend APIs in the right way, right, with good backend server technology running the front end. The mobile app itself can be lightning fast, beautiful, everything you want in it.
Yeah, this may not be the case anymore, but I remember the early days of Facebook mobile with messaging, right? And you would get the mobile experience on the web app would be one way, and then the app would be another way, and it's just like it was that much better on the app than it was on the web app experience.
Right.
So, yeah.
Another advantage to mobile apps, which we called out before, is offline access. So we don't really realize this, but as our phone, when we're using a downloaded app, our phone is bouncing from, if we're not using cellular data, we're bouncing from, one network to another. Or we might be driving, right, and we might be not connected to something for a very long time, and we're still able to use our apps. Our apps are detecting that there's no longer internet service, so it's holding on to information locally, and then when it reconnects, it's then making that sync again, so it's almost like a seamless process. Seamless connection. To our eyes, it seems seamless, right? But in the back end, it's doing the work. Another really big one, which we called out before, another really big advantage is access to the device features, like the phone, like the accelerometer, like the gyroscope, the GPS, like where we're located, where we're at, what we're doing. So, there's also some high-level data also that apps can have access to, but certainly can't have access to all the data that's on the phone. And then the fourth one, the big advantage is the user experience. So when you're building a mobile app for a specific, product that it's going to be a mobile app, you can really hone in on that user experience because you're really going to know, as long as you really know who the audience is and what you're trying to do here, you can really tailor a user experience that's directly to those users that they're going to love and enjoy.
Yeah, especially if you really want to hitch on to the iOS culture or the way that Google does their thing. I do way too many finger quotes. Call me out on that, guys. I need to stop using finger quotes.
Jason quote.
Quote Jason quote. So many website names we're coming up with for I'm going to have
quote
jasonquote.com. Anyway, so especially if you're really targeting a one of those different app providers cultures, like obviously there's a way that iOS apps look.
Yeah.
And if you tailor your app and you're able to do that, you can really plug into that experience, and iOS users will just love using your app.
Right.
But if you have that same experience on that app, but it looks like Google Material or whatever that's called, that can throw users off.
You might as well shut the lights off. You might as well turn your server off.
Yeah. And I'm not really an iPhone I'm not an iPhone guy, as you could probably already tell. But there is something to say about people who are, and they want it to be that way.
Absolutely.
And if you can replicate that experience, then you're going to get a lot of users staying in your app instead of going to an alternative.
Yep. So a few disadvantages to mobile apps. The big one, which is always talked about, but not necessarily, it doesn't necessarily have to be a big one, is the development complexities, right? And there used to be this stigma on, well, do you want this to be an iOS app or an Android app? Right, for mobile, and thankfully came the days of, well, there's a way to build a mobile app that can be deployed to both. While we've talked about you need to keep the user experience separated from the two, and there are ways to do that. Yes, there's a little bit of complexities there, but it isn't night and day compared to building a web app that has a general user experience to separate user experience on a mobile app. It isn't that big of a complexity. So
at least not anymore.
Right. But it used to be, certainly did used to be. So that's not really that big of a disadvantage today, but there still are complexities. Of course, when you reach in and want to use the GPS, you want to reach in and use the phone, right? Reach in and use the camera.
Or even more in-depth things like graphics processors and actual processors and stuff. Like if you get into building games on apps, then some of those, I don't want to get too technical, but some of those layers and languages that let you build an app for both platforms, but with one code base, can't really do the things that you might want it to do. So like
Sure.
video games are probably the more intensive thing. So you probably aren't going to build a video game that's cross-platform. You're going to have to separate those into two code bases. And, who knows, maybe one of the people listening to this are a video game maker.
Yeah.
But anyway.
That'd be cool. Hey, comment on our stuff. Let us know.
Yeah, that'd be great.
So then the next two disadvantages, which are kind of tied together. So the first one is updates. Typically for a web app, you just deploy updates to the server and you're good. Like if the code has a change. For a mobile app, kind of the same, but it needs to go through a build process. That build needs to go into a new build, needs to be uploaded to the Play Store or the Apple iOS store.
And then as a company, you kind of have to. You're at the whims of the user at that point. Do they have auto updates on?
Yep.
If they don't have auto updates on, are they going to notice that there's an update? Depending on different demographics, like there are some parts of users that don't even know that phones update, right?
Yep.
So they might never see one of your updates, and you'll never be able to get that to them without grandson showing them or something like that.
Sure.
Not to be ageist, but that's one of the categories.
Yep. And then, from top down, from the app stores down, like they have requirements, like the versions of software need to be updated. There's different laws and regulations that change over versions, and your app needs to make sure that it's adhering, or else your app will stop showing up in the stores to be downloaded. So not only from users or listening to users, or even your own updates need to be happening, you need to be listening to any changes from there. And that's a level of complexity that doesn't happen on the web app side of things.
Right, and we've had an experience before where we've launched an app and have done 2 or 3 different updates to that app, and then suddenly one of those updates triggered a review, and it wouldn't complete the update, like it wouldn't pass the review because we're using some new thing, or we didn't have all the right stuff to it, and basically at that point we went through a couple-day review process before the app could even an update to that app could even be pushed to the stores. So
right. So the second piece to that, which kind of aligns with what we were just discussing here, is the approval through the app stores.
Sorry to
compared to a web app,
jump the gun.
Compared to a web app, you just deploy your web app to a server.
Yeah, it's owned by you, or basically owned by you, operated by you.
There's no review. Like there's no
police telling you.
Of course, whoever you host your web app with is going to be scanning things if they happen to come across them. But from a mobile app perspective, new mobile apps get reviewed.
Yeah.
At some point, somebody is sitting in a chair, or some AI thing is going to come in and it's going to scan the build. It's going to look over the description. It's going to look at the photos that you uploaded for your app. It's going to check out your business.
Yeah. Suddenly, this app is asking for customer information, for credit card numbers, or something like that. Well, that triggers a brand new review, a brand new
approval process,
set of things that need to be hoops that need to be jumped through.
How are you collecting?
Rightfully so. But,
Yeah, we certainly had on a separate occasion on one of our apps that we were publishing, right? I think this was Apple wanted to really understand our client's business a little bit more than we thought that they needed to. And they were confused on some things, and we had to go back and forth and back and forth. And this app is aligned with a launch, right? So it's really getting hectic, like down to the wire. Like, what more do you need to know about the business to approve this app?
They were probably wondering if we were trying to skirt Apple's own
the
payment system, right? Right. So we weren't. Apple, please.
No. So that's advantages, disadvantages to mobile apps. Now web apps, which we kind of already covered a few. Big advantages the cross-platform, right? You can deploy your web app to a server and it can work across all different browsers. The thought is that it should work across all different browsers, whether they're on a laptop, a tablet, a Kindle Fire, a TV, a mobile device, you name it. Audio, right? And they should work from an accessibility standpoint. Certainly easier to update, right? Even from a code perspective or even content perspective, even connected to third-party APIs, web apps are going to be a little bit easier to run updates through. Obviously, no installation needed. right? So if
the installation is happening at the update,
right,
like when you're deploying.
Right. Yeah. So if, let's see, jasonplaystore.com had a cool little web thing that I wanted to check out, I can just go to the web address and check it out.
Right.
I don't need to install it, nothing. But if you had some apps there that I wanted to install, I could.
Right.
Right.
Definitely real and definitely available.
Yeah.
That's
And
the worst link ever.
no approval needed. Web apps just deploy to the server, connect a domain name, send your customers there. They can start purchasing, buying, downloading, putting leads in. And then an advantage to web apps is that they're cost effective. Yeah. At the end of the day, they're likely going to be a little bit more cost effective than a mobile app will be, but that might not be, the main advantage or, what a business is typically after.
Yeah. I mean, I guess if you're looking for the quickest and cheapest way to get your name on the internet and available
your
for people,
product launch,
that's definitely an advantage.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. 100%. Disadvantages to web apps, right? They have limited offline capabilities. Obviously, if you don't have the internet, your web address is not going to be available.
Yeah.
Or whatever they're trying to, whatever they're trying to access. Performance itself might be a little slower, obviously, because you're running the web address through the browser on your computer, and you might have other things going on your computer, like we talked about earlier. You might be a videographer that's processing a massive video, and you might have 17 Chrome windows open.
And not realize it.
You got email running.
Story of our lives.
Yeah, lots of things going on, and that will affect how fast your web app runs on someone else's computer, which we don't really talk about very often, right? Mm-hmm. Another disadvantage is limited access to device features, right?
Purposefully so. Browsers don't give you all of the access that they need to the device that you're on.
Right. Location services need to be approved by the user in the browser using it, actually. You can access a phone, but really it's whatever phone, device, or app has been installed.
If there is one installed,
if
or if the user
Skype
even knows that there is one.
Right.
And that can introduce a level of confusion for the user too. If they click that button and Skype pops up and they have no idea what Skype is.
Yeah.
They're going to be, why is this app opening? Close. Just close it all.
Just close it. Done. Just close it. Yeah. User engagement, right? Without a presence on the app stores, right?
That's a good point.
Features like push notifications, right? While a lot of that has come about with progressive web apps where you can send push notifications through web apps, right? Where, you're getting into more of the weeds and more of the complexities that come along with building a pretty large and complex web app.
Yeah. I still find it's a little clunky as a user to experience those things too.
Right.
The weird pop-up shows up that you have to approve anyway or block. And a lot of the times, like when one of those pops up, my default is to just click block because I don't want to take the time to figure out what it is, right? I'm there for one reason, and it's to get the information or log in or whatever. And this pop-up is just, no, I don't want your website to randomly give me notifications while I'm just here for 2 minutes to read your article.
Yeah, I remember, this was shortly after progressive web apps came out, or I think it was Chrome kind of rolled it out. And then there was a period of time I was getting these notifications, and I'm like, how do I stop these? Like, where are these coming from? Like, what did I do? And finally I've read this article or watched a YouTube video. And I'm like, and I went in and I found the list, and I'm like, disabled, block. I'm like, wow. I'm like, no way. I was allowing all of these to come through. It was crazy. And then the really last big disadvantage to web apps is that you're kind of handcuffed by the browser. But browsers have become very powerful. Browsers have become very, broad. They release updates a lot faster.
Yeah.
They got a lot of cool updates that they release all the time. So I'm not even sure if this is like a true.
It can be an annoyance though, because you just like with a mobile app though, it's the same principle. You don't know if your user is going to know of or actively go and update the browser that they're using. So there might be something
true.
The little update button at the top.
Right.
Sometimes if you don't click that and actually do the updates,
Google Meet will not work.
Yeah, the websites you're using, we've had that. Google Meet won't work, or whatever else that you're using might not work. So yeah. And again, not everybody might know that. We've been on web calls, Google Meet calls with coworkers, and they're like, this thing isn't working, and I don't know why. And we see this big red update triangle thing. It's like, did you click the big warning that says you should probably update your browser? Because that's probably what's going on.
But that's really as a reason. So yeah, I mean, that's advantages, disadvantages, the characteristics, right? The features of them. We hope we've covered them. Now, from a business perspective, right? If you're a business and you're kind of, flipping a coin or trying to decide, well, which side of the fence do we live on? Or should we go mobile apps? Should we go web apps? Sometimes, the roadmap or whatever the business is will dictate, it absolutely has to be a mobile app. It cannot not be a mobile app. Or it's okay if it's a web app and a mobile app, or maybe just a web app.
Waze would not work as a web app, for example, right? Correct. It needs access to GPS. It needs to be in people's pockets all the time. It needs to be running in the background. So like a browser-based thing is not going to be able to reliably know that it's open or open itself, really, and know where a user is, where the cops are, all that type of thing. So perfect example of how a web app just wouldn't work for that type of product.
Right. And imagine an app like TikTok or Facebook, Instagram Reels. The amount of videos that people can swipe through with their thumb will far outweigh the amount of videos that people could go through with a mouse scroll wheel, or like a push up with a mouse, or like a keyboard down and up, right?
Yeah.
So like those apps, obviously, like you can get to them on a web app, but they're far more better user experience.
Tailored to
absolutely.
The type of device that should be in the hand. Yeah.
Right. So looking at this through a business lens, right? There's really 4 things you want to take into consideration, right? Number 1 is the audience engagement, right? What are you looking to get? If you were to do a mobile app or a web app, right? Well, who's your audience? Like, you got to know your audience. You got to start there. If you don't know your audience, start there. Once you understand who your audience is, their wants and needs and desires, and what they're after, if they use technology, then you can really start to weigh in quite a bit there. Number 2 is cost implications, right? They're kind of the same. Mobile and web apps, they're not really that far apart. Like when it comes to building, a big web app or a big mobile app, they're going to kind of sort of cancel each other out when it comes to cost. Web app might be a little bit more, or mobile app might be a little bit more if we're tacking on to like the camera and like the feed, like the hardware of the phone. But in all actuality, you've got they're almost consistent.
The one caveat to that is if you need a native iOS app and a native Android app, because then again, two different projects, probably like 2 different teams working on those 2 things, figuring out those details in tandem at the same time. So obviously that's going to be a lot more expensive than using it's in our world, it's called the hybrid approach, where there's a layer, an application layer that can kind of build for both of those platforms.
Yep.
In the simplest way possible.
And then number 3 is accessibility and reach, right? This is a big one, right? Which one has the wider reach? Certainly, people just aren't willy-nilly installing apps on their phones. Yeah, they might do it to kind of check it out, but most people have a set of 30 to 40 to 45 apps that they have on their phone, and you've got to do a really good job to overcome one of those already, overtake or earn a spot on someone's phone. Like you really have to understand that could be a barrier.
But there is kind of there's the thought that Google Play Store and the Apple App Store are a search interface of their own, right? So you can use those to go and find new applications. So if you build a web app, you're not going to appear in one of those 2 methods of searching.
Right.
If you build a mobile app, then if you're building a calculator, right? Like somebody's going to type in calculator and yours might appear in that list, and that's how they find you, and that's how they do it. If you're just calculator, by jason.com, not everybody's going to know that calculatorbyjason.com exists. You're going to have to market it. You're going to have to put it out there and make it accessible for other people to search for. It's not going to be in a store repository for you.
Yep. Correct. Yep. And then what monetization opportunities are you looking for? for your business, whether it's going to be mobile or web. Obviously, both will have, called in-app purchases, right? In-app purchases is really a term for while working in an app, but not necessarily a mobile app. Could be a web app
too.
And then any subscription models, right? If you've got, download our app, you're charging a monthly subscription for someone to have like access to the mobile app. Maybe there's also a subscription, you can also gain access to the web app, for the same price or a little bit more, or it doesn't even matter.
Yeah.
But just think through your monetization and what you're looking to do with it, or if you're going to try to earn money from it or draw revenue from it. If not, then you can just strike through that.
Yeah.
Strike through that conversation.
Don't worry about it. I think I don't know if this is a fifth consideration or what, but there is the thought that you would have both a mobile app and a web app doing the same thing at the same time, depending on what the user might want. So that's also another thing that you have to consider. Is this something that could be in both spots, in both places?
Yep.
And what are the ramifications of that?
Yeah. And if we were to throw in our own expert opinion, likely it should.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Right,
I would say so. Because you kind of have the two camps of people who are going to just go to a web browser and they find that the easiest thing to do, or people who just want something that's built into their phone with a nice little icon that they can just click on without having to create like a browser shortcut or something like that. So definitely going both is the way, but of course that's a cost increase, obviously. So.
Yeah, or the people that lose their phone, or it gets damaged, or it just fell into the sink.
Yeah, that's another thing. If you have just a mobile app and somebody's phone gets destroyed, stolen, whatever, and you don't have a web app to mirror it, then those users are effectively not your users anymore.
Right.
Or at least they're going to have a problem.
Yeah, they have no way to go in and stop their service or...
Right, or keep using your service, because that's what you would really want. You don't really want them to have to stop their service, but with an alternative way of accessing it, they can still go for it.
Yep.
This was good.
Yeah, this was fun. Yeah, so disadvantages, advantages, mobile apps, web apps, history of the web. Thank you. We launched, 2 products during this time? So quote jasonquote.com and jasonplaystore.com.
jasonplaystore.com, yeah.
Awesome. And we talked through some of the business, keeping an eye on things.
Calculator by Jason.
Calculator by Jason.
Yeah.
So we hope you enjoyed, and leave us a comment, let us know what you thought, and we'll see you next time.
Yeah. Take it easy.